Hawken Classic. It's hot, and I know people have come a long ways, but I appreciate you showing up here. And I'm going to try to give you some, a decent talk here in a little bit about a Flintlock Hawken. And I might mention that right after lunch, the Hawken shop has a talk, and Art Russell will be here, Greg Roberts, myself. And I'll give a talk then about Hawken cheek pieces. And then tomorrow, I'm going to give one on full stock Hawkens. So whenever you can, come back. There's a lot of good talks, and there's a lot of good people. Be sure to go up to the Sappington House where Greg Grimes has exhibits up there. Because one gentleman up there has 3 original Hawkens, and another has 4 original Hawkens. And you can see the real live thing. So I want you to go up there and get an opportunity to see those. A couple of those I haven't seen, and I'm going to be up there photographing myself. My name is Bob Woodfill, and I've written several articles in Mobile Blast. And then a year ago, well, several years ago, I wrote this book on Hawken Rifles. And I only had 1,500 copies. And people says, oh, you're going to be stuck with at least 1,000 of those. And so I went down to NMRA and I said, I'm going to make you a deal. You sell these things and I'll give you a cut. And it was just a cut was to cover the cost of printing. But anyway, we've sold all 1,500 of them. And I never would have guessed that. Now, in the future, if I live long enough, I hope to redo that book with an update, because there's some errors in the book that I found that people pointed out to me. So look for that. The next few years will come out, and I think there's some of those available online at eBay and places like that. Come on up here closer, gentlemen. You're going to be able to read the screen. Okay, the Flintlock Hawken. We figured this would be a very good topic to start off with, because people are always wanting to talk about Flintlock Hawkens. And let me get organized here. Maybe I'm not there. Oh, I went too far. Okay. Were there any Flintlock Hawkens? This question is asked at just about every presentation that I make on Hawken Rifles. People want to know, were there any Flintlocks? Okay. Number 2 here. In other words, did the Hawken brothers, Jake and Samuel, make any flint ignition rifles in St. Louis before they started making their pretty famous and well-known half-stop Hawkens in percussion in about 1830. And why I use that date, 1830, is because that's when percussion caps became available in St. Louis, even though percussion caps were known in Europe and the East Coast. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm going to go through these slides and kind of talk about it. And I've left about a half an hour at the end. You can ask questions. And that's you can stone me. Okay. The simple answer, I gotta know where I press. I don't know if I'm hooked up here or not. Maybe I can leave it out. There it's on. Okay. No big deal. The simple answer is number 3. That experts and collectors of Hawken rifles have not found any flint ignition rifles of Hawken manufacture with the barrel stamps of J. Hawken or JMS Hawken on them to date. And Mr. Gordon has verified this. He's a collector in Santa Fe and has 30-some Hawkens. Okay. I gotta get organized. Oh, going the wrong way. Well, maybe I'm not going the wrong way. Eric, I may have to get you to go over here to the computer and press the little advance thing. This thing doesn't seem to want to work for me for some reason. Huh? No, we're on this side. My laser pointer won't come on. Maybe you could advance that from here for or something. Yeah, wait. Go back now. Go back. Go back. Okay, okay. Now the next one. The Hawken. This is a brief summary of the Hawken brothers' rifle making history. Jacob Hawken came to St. Louis in 1818 and Samuel in 1821. The first Hawken that they made jointly was in the winter of 1822, 1823, and they made it for General Ashley. General Ashley is the general that organized the 100 men to go up the Missouri River to establish fur trading post. That was the first one made. The Ashley Hawkins, it says down at the bottom, was built during that winter. Okay, Molly? This is a picture of a Hawken rifle that was actually made by Sam in either Ohio or Maryland. And this is not what we're talking about. This is a Pennsylvania, Kentucky rifle. And they did make some rifles back east, but we're talking about the Plains rifle that was used during the fur trade and up through the settling of the West. Okay, there's one of those in existence. Next one, Molly, please. This is a chronology of Hawken rifles. I really need my pointer here. We'll try to see what happens. I can't do it. Can't do it. Okay, go up one, Molly. I can see that. Okay. You can look at this later. But what I've done on this chronology chart, I started in 1800, I've gone to 1870. I put some important dates on this chart. About 1820 was the start of the Rocky Mountain fur trade, and it ran to 1820 down here. Okay? On this side, I want to show you that the Flintlock Hawken, the Flintlock Rifle period started long before Lewis and Clark. This is where Lewis and Clark was. We had the Harper's Ferry trade rifles, and this, we call the Ashley Hawken, was the first joint rifle made by Sam and Jacob in St. Louis. Call that 1823, that would right here. Okay. Then we have the formation of the JMS partnership in 1825. That starts this little diagram and goes till 1849 when Jacob died of cholera. That would be any JMS Hawkins made would have to fall during that period. After Jacob died, Sam started making Hawkins. And he continued to, let's say, 1850, although his son took over the business and some other people. And then the last period was J.P. Gemmer, one of the workmen, started making Hawkins, copying the Hawkins, and he made the Hawken Spencer, the Hawken trapdoor, some of those clear up into the 1870s. Okay. Now, the period we're talking about here, and everybody has an argument about, is they'll agree that in about 1830, percussion caps became available in St. Louis. And therefore, the first, second, and so forth Hawkins that we know of, the Peterson, the Dunham, the Christie, Atchison, the Atchison is on display up at the Sappington House. You want to go look at it. Medina and John Brown Hawkins all fell in the 1830s to 40s. What the period we're talking about is this slight overlap right here Did Hawken make any flintlock rifles during this 1830 period? And basically, none have been found by collectors or experts to date. So that's what we're going to just address ourselves to now. Okay, I'll show you this at the end. It's a lot of information there, and I don't expect you to absorb that. Oh, okay. Yeah, that one works. Okay, I can get out of your way now. Yeah. Okay, next one, Mom. This is Ashley Flintlock Hawken copy. This is a copy of the Ashley Flintlock that I made myself. It is called a Super Hawken. It was made by Jacob and Samuel in the winter of 1822 and 1823. We know that from comments by Sam Hawken in 1882. The only data we know about this rifle is it threw a 1-ounce ball, had a 3.5-foot long barrel, and I put this down here at the bottom. It had to be flintlock because percussion caps were not available in St. Louis until 1830. So this gun was made 7 years before percussion caps were available in St. Louis. Next one, Molly. Didn't quite. Oh, yeah, it did. Okay. This is the other side of that rifle you just saw. This is the author, me, concept of what an Ashley Flintlock Hawken would look like. It would have a 3.5-foot long barrel, be 69 caliber, and I had Ed Rails make me a barrel of those specifications, all with iron fittings. The original barrel on this rifle, the first Flintlock, was probably 1.1 inches or 1.25 inches with no taper, which means it really been a heavy Hawken. But you got to remember, this Hawken was only used by the mountain men to shoot the Indians who were shooting it down at them as they went up the Missouri River on the overhangs. This rifle held a record for buffalo kill, one shot at 283 yards, and they called it Old Bill. This is all described in Hanson's, both of his books. Okay, next one, Molly. Again, why no Flintlock Hawken rifles between 1823, when they made the Ashley, until 1830, when they started making their standard S Hawken. This is the period that everybody discusses and wants to know, where are the Flintlock Hawkens? They think they should have made them. The JMS partnership was formed in 1825. About halfway in between there. Invoices show Jake and Sam during this period were busy repairing guns and fur trapping equipment for the American Fur Company. And this is recorded by Hanson in his book. You can read that. So we actually have evidence that Sam and Jake were doing repair work, making horseshoes, things of that variety. They weren't making Hawkens. Jake and Sam also had real estate investments, and they had several civic services. So they were busy. Thank you, Molly. This is a picture of, everybody says, well, we know Jim Bridger had a Hawken. Yes, Jim Bridger had a couple of Hawkens. But Jim Bridger did not have a Flintlock Hawken. This is a diagram of a J.J. Henry Flintlock rifle that Jim Bridger bought from the American Fur Company in 1826. Therefore, it would have had to be a Flintlock. Bridger did purchase some additional rifles in 1842 for $33 as shown in his Shoto accounts. So therefore, the idea that Jim Bridger had a Flintlock Hawken doesn't fly. Next one, Molly. Again, the question. Why no Flintlock Hawkens from 1823 to 1830? My Canadian correspondent, Patrick Jack, wonders why the two most skilled gunsmiths in St. Louis made no Hawken rifles, JMS Hawken rifles, during that period. Browner, who I think you're all familiar with, and I discussed this last year, he says that if they did, they would not look like we want them to look like. In other words, they would be without iron fittings and a close-to-wrist trigger guard. And we're going to show you a real one here in a little bit. Now, I'm open to anyone who wants to research this topic, but you need to probably live in Missouri and have a bunch of money to do it, because you're going to have to look at a lot of rifles. Okay, we're going to quickly look at a couple of the earliest percussion rifles that Jake and Sam made. This is the Peterson rifle. It was made in about 1830. And what I want to point out to you here is Jake, who I believe made this rifle, the cheek piece doesn't have a curve here. It's sloped and terminates on the top of the wrist near the comb. It has a homemade scroll, a homemade butt plate, and a homemade patch box. This rifle would be an example of one of the very first rifles, but you can see it does not have, it is not a flintlock, and it doesn't really have flintlock features. This rifle is in the Cody Museum, and it's available to look at up there. Next one, Molly. This is probably the second oldest JMS Hawken rifle, which would be made in the early 30s. It's a 50 caliber full stock JMS, stamped on the lock plate right here, JMS Hawken. It's in the Dunham collection, and I reported on it in a copy in muzzle labs this year. But that's a good example of what the very first Hawken rifle would look like. Okay, keep going. We're experiencing technical difficulties. Nope, you're way at the end now. We need to go back. Back one more. Okay, there you go. Here is another early JMS Hawken rifle. It has a close-to-wrist trigger guard, all iron fittings, full stock 58 caliber. This rifle happens to be in Jim Gordon's collection at the moment. I reported on it in 2020, and it's the first known JMS with the close-to-wrist guard. And that was an advanced length that started in the 1840s. Next one, Molly. This is actually a rifle that went to the mountains. This is called the Beckworth Rifle. It is documented and dated to trade Flintlock Rifle. This is a Flintlock rifle that was converted to a percussion rifle. There's a very good article by Blake and Muzzleloader in 215 which describes this rifle. But it was not a JMS Hawken rifle. This was probably a Kentucky-made rifle, but it was definitely a Flintlock. It definitely went to the mountains. In 1824 is when Beckworth joined Ashley. Next one, Molly. Modern Flintlock rifle. A Flintlock rifle is intoxicating. The shooters today, it's just intoxicating to them. Like I said, it's the first question I get at every talk I give. Were there any Flintlock Hawkens? And I showed you that collectors and experts say, no, there weren't. It doesn't mean there weren't any, but they've not found any. Maybe they were made, maybe they're lost, maybe they didn't make them. But Hansen suggests that Jake and Sam had other things on their mind during this period and didn't make any rifles. This rifle, a full stock Flintlock, which we're going to show you a real good example here in a minute, is very appealing to today's sportsmen and hunters. It's actually a fairly easy rifle to make. And if I was a young man, 25 or 30, and I wanted to make $1 million, I'd start making these. But I get requests for them weekly. Not weekly, but every month, let's say. So there is a market for them, and they're really easy to make. You could probably make them for $1,000 and sell them for $2,000. Okay. Modern Flintlock rifle makers. Sorry? I moved too much. Okay. Molly's my day nurse too. She watches after me. I'm going to turn 80, so I got to have lights. Got somebody to watch after me. Okay. Back in the 1960s and 70s, Green Road Rifle Works, Lyman's and others, made their version of what they thought a Flintlock Hawken would look like, even though we know there wasn't any made by the Hawken Rifle. Generally, it consists of a 50 to 58 caliber full stock Tennessee loading rifle, iron fittings and close to wrist trigger guard, and some type of a flintlock of that period. A lot of these were made during that period. Here's an example of one made by Tom Dawson. Tom Dawson's kind of my mentor. I learned how to make Hawken rifles under his tutelage. Tom made this particular rifle for another buckskinner, Andy Doc Baker. Does any of you guys here know or have heard of Andy Doc Baker? Well, Rick knows him. There's another one. Okay. I own this rifle now, and this is what Tom made for Andy. But he didn't know exactly what he was doing. He used a 69 caliber fill large barrel, bob roller, flintlock, iron fitting, so forth and so on. But he put a patch box on here that was not going to the 1840s. So therefore, how could this be an 1823, 1830 rifle? The lock is wrong. The snobble on the end was wrong. And Tom was just really showcasing what he could do. That's not what an authentic would look like. I'm going to show you one here in a little bit. I made a copy of what I thought one would look like if Hawken Brothers had made one, of which I'm convinced they didn't. But if they made one in the 1823 to 1829 period, based on the fact that they were seeing all these rifles come in from the American Fur Company, which are being repaired, I think this is what it would look like. And this is just my version. Already I've changed my mind. There are things wrong with this. So let's look at this. I used a shorter barrel, 54 caliber. I used a common lock, very similar to the 1803. 3-1800 iron fittings, an iron patch box, similar to the one back in Virginia, and a sling. I wrote this up in the 2018 muzzle blast, and why I put a sling on it was, I thought a mountain man would want to have that around his neck when he's wading around the water with Indians on shore. But nowhere in the paintings or nowhere in the records do I find any slings. The only slings I find documented were the Lewis and Clark rifle, which were made for the Lewis and Clark expedition in 1803, and they asked for 10 or 11 slings. I don't remember the exact number. So they did have slings on the ones from Lewis and Clark. And why they don't show them on a mountain man rifle is beyond me. Because if you carried a 10 or 12 pound rifle in the mountains, hunting and doing things, let me tell you, sling's a nice thing to have. Okay, that's just my version. I purchased this rifle, which is an example of a modern flintlock rifle. Not as good as the one we're going to show you here in a minute, at the 2022 Friendship Shoot. It has a 36-inch long, 54 caliber barrel, Eleanor lock, and curly maple. It has lots of curl. Now, we know for a fact that that would not probably be the way the rifle would look, based on what Bob Browner thinks and what I think. But this is what today's shooters and hunters want in a Flintlock Hawken rifle. And I wrote this up in 2023 in an article in Muzzle Blast. In summary, no known authentic flint ignition Hawken rifles with barrel stampings of either J. Hawken or JMS Hawken, St. Louis, are known. That doesn't mean that I'm not brought, people don't bring half a dozen of them to me every year to verify, and are also to verify, because we somebody else's interpretation. Doesn't mean that a builder today can't build his version of a Flintlock Hawken, one right here, and enjoy shooting black powder. I greatly encourage the building and shooting of black powder rifles, no matter what you want to call them. Next one. I just will leave this on here while I take questions and answers. Hopefully get more answers. See how much time we got left. Maybe 15 minutes, right? Okay. That's my presentation. This slideshow will be available down at the Hawken shop, and all this information is either in my book, which is unfortunately out of print now, or in articles in muzzle glass. But if you want to come down, we'll show this little slideshow to you down at the Hawken shop. Maybe I can answer a couple of questions. Make them easy. No questions. Joe, sir. Yeah.
Do we know where the Hawken workshop was in St. Louis? Where it was located?
Yes. It's listed in John Baird's 1968 book and Hanson's 1979 book. It's on Laurel Street, and I actually had pictures. This is a picture of the only real picture we have of the Hawken shop, and this was actually the Gemmer owned it at that time. The shop's right here under guns. You got to remember, photographs didn't come into prominence until during the Civil War. Now, that's 1860s, okay? So a lot of these rifles were made before then, and where the Hawken shop was, and just didn't get recorded because we didn't have pictures. Can I answer your question, sir?
I assume that Laurel Street is on the south side of downtown St. Louis?
Yes. I'm not familiar with St. Louis that much, but yes, there's maps in Hanson's book. We'll show you the locations. It was on Washington Street. It was down on the levee, right next to the Missouri River. Yes. So if you want to come down to the Hawken shop, I've got some more diagrams down there I can show you. Another question over here. Yes, sir.
Who made barrels for the Hawken Brothers, and what is the nominal twist?
Okay. The question is, who made barrels for the Hawken Brothers? And second one is, what was the twist? The answer to the first one is pretty easy. They made actually a few of their own early on, probably in the early 1830s. And they were made from the ironworks and smelters around St. Louis. As they got up into the late 1830s, in the 1840s, they bought rifle barrels, fully made. And there were manufacturers making them on the East Coast, Philadelphia, Cincinnati, places like that. You have to remember that St. Louis was an outfitting port. It was kind of a put a kit together and have a rifle or have a wagon or whatever it is, but it's not a manufacturing center. The manufacturing centers were back east. So they ordered parts from the east, whether it's locks, barrels, or what. That started in the late 1830s. We even have barrels on authentic Hawken rifles that are marked Remington. So they made a few of the first ones early on. Later on, they purchased them. It was simply an economic thing. The question of twist. Every rifle that experts have examined had a 1/48 twist. And everybody here, being a modern muzzle-loading shooter, would say, well, that's too fast of a twist for 50, 54, 58 caliber bullets. It won't stabilize at distance. Well, the report don't record that. Now, I've had this question asked several times before, and I have an experiment set up where I'm going to do 148 and 160 twist on these. I hope to get that in muzzle glass soon. Right at the moment, the Hawken shop only sells barrels by Rice. It's a 1/48 twist. If you want one in a different twist, you can order another barrel for another $125. Excuse me, get it. But that's the way they come at the moment. I just say in the future, I'm going to report on this in Muller Blast, but I haven't gotten it done. Okay, another question over here. Yes, sir.
What was the nominal trigger pull length on the Hawken?
The nominal length?
Yeah. No, the trigger pull.
Oh, trigger pull. Art Russell and I disagree a little on that. He says it's around 14 inches. All of mine measure are about 13 and 5/8. Yes, sir.
In 1968, the gun club I belonged to, and still do, was called Kansas. Elderly gentleman that had a full stock Hawken.
Yes, sir.
And it had a 15.5-inch trigger pull. And I thought it probably built it for Paul Bunyan. You throw it up and it goes right there.
There are some Hawkens known with 15-inch length of poles or longer. They were probably built special items for a particular customer. Hawken would do this. They would make stuff, if you wanted to go in, they would make you up something special. So, you know, they had the Chevrolets available that are around 14 inches, but if you had to have one 15, they'd make you one. Yes, sir.
Also, in 73, we were at Rendezvous in Colorado, Midland, that John Barrett was there, and
Levita Rendezvous?
yeah,
I was there.
and there was a gentleman walked up to the campground, and it was Don King, me, and some other local gun club members that were looking at him. He asked if John Barrett was there. Well, I've got a gun, I was told I needed to show you. Took out of his gun case a brass-mounted Hawken rifle. And it
Okay.
was written.
Okay.
Okay.
There are a couple of Hawkens known with either all or part brass mounting. Some of them are in the Cody Museum. But 99 out of 100 are iron.
And Barrett's comment was, well, there goes my idea in my
Yeah.
book I just printed.
Well, let me give you a little background, and actually I think this is fact, not fable. John Baird was a great storyteller, and I had a few drinks with him in HTP over the years. And John started some really good stories. I mean, his story was every man in the 100-man outfit of General Ashley had a Hawken. Well, that was not true. But Art reported on this in the 1970s in Muzzle Blast, and he had a big following. He honked off Mr. Hansen, who is truly a scholar, and he was a curator at the Museum of the Fur Trade. And Jim Hansen wrote a book specifically to refute what John said. Now, John was a storyteller, and just like you and I, we like to tell a story once in a while and have a beer, you know. But Mr. Hansen just couldn't take it. But you have to give John Baird a lot of credit. For 10 years, he was out there. He and Art Russell brought the Hawken rifle back in the 1960s and 1970s. And I was there. I was just a youngster in high school, but I was there and I listened to all the stories and everything was said. But I cannot badmouth John Baird, even though many of his sayings are proven not to be true by Mr. Hansen. So, yeah, road for interpretation here.
How many official Hawkens did they actually?
Now speak, I can't hear you.
How many official Hawken rifles do they know were made, and how many have been documented that survived?
Question is, how many official Hawken rifles were made? There is an accounting by Mr. Hansen in his book. You're welcome to get it and read it. Some people say the Hawken shop, consisting of 4 or 5 workmen, and Jake and Sam produced maybe 100 Hawken rifles a year. I think that's a big number myself. A really big number. But there are some really good Hawken experts here that own some Hawkens. I'd put that question to them. I like to look at all the Hawkens I can, but a lot of people have them collected as economic savings, and they don't want to show them, and I understand that. But I try to get all the information out that I can. I don't think there is near as many as John Baird said, but I think there's a lot more than what Jim Hansen said.
And how many do you think survived? I mean, how many are?
Oh, survived?
Yeah.
How many pitchforks survived?
I mean, I just know from our time in the mountains hunting and carrying guns, I cannot believe on a short 7-day trip the wear and tear of our guns get on horseback. So if you were literally in the mountains for a year or two, your gun would just be in tatters, is my point. So.
In those days, the gun was a very important item in a man's possession. And in my opinion, he took good care of it. Bill Hamilton, 1902, in his book says, they traded in Hawken rifles for the new Sharps rifles, and they threw the Hawkens away. Well, I think that's another one of these stories, because no mountain man's going to throw that rifle away. He could sell it or give it to somebody, or he would use it. There's a lot of stories about that. I've even heard stories in California they use Hawken rifles as crowbars and different things. Well, where are they? I don't find them. So, yes, sir.
So I have two questions. Was there a standardized lock? In other words, did they buy a lock, or was there a standard lock type or shape for a Hawken?
There was a standard shape. The main thing was getting the hammer to hit the nipple square.
Yeah.
I have seen several original Hawkens in which the hammer was cut in half and the piece was welded in. And Tom Dawson told me that Hawken would oftentimes throw the hammers away and make their own hammer, which they did in the latter year. Now, they made a few of the original, in the 1830s, locks themselves, the craftsmen did in the Hawken shop. But later in, they bought them from Eastern sources. From Powell, the last one was Gibbons in the name of the place now. But they bought them. Now, all this just makes sense. Is it easier to spend time making a lock, making a barrel, making a thimble, or buying it? There's that time there were people supplying these. So they were in there to make money, buy them. Now they weren't, shot in made or anything. They're good quality things, but they bought a lot of the products. Yeah. Now the question I've always asked myself, and I'm going to ask some of the people who should be in the know, did they have a standard stock pattern or a pantograph? Yeah. Those were available in those days. So I don't know the answer to that.
So this is on the rib. So did they have a standard? Well, did the ribs come attached to the barrel?
The ribs were attached to the barrels with screws.
Okay.
The heads of the screws were many times peened and then filed all smooth, and people interpreted them as rivets. But they were actually screws with slots that were in there. Yeah. They were left a little high, they were peened off, filed off. There would be 4 of them that would hold the rib. Now, right at the end of the rib, at the muzzle, on every Hawken rifle that I've ever seen, had a little piece of solder. There was solder in the end of the underrib, and they soldered that directly to the barrel up near the muzzle, which would make absolute sense since it was supposed to be rubber. You didn't want that to come loose. Right. You see a lot of muzzle loaders in which they're loose. Okay, I'll probably run out of time. I'll tell you what, if you've got more questions, come down to the Hawken shop. We've got, I hope, the video available, and I'll be glad to answer questions down there this afternoon. We'll also, Art Russell, Greg Roberts, and myself will be back in here this afternoon with 3 more talks. Okay? And I really appreciate your questions. I appreciate your interest. Get out there and buy Hawken. Okay, thank you very much.